let's look at how we can add an animated texture to a polygonal object. For instance, if we wanted to animate the screen on this TV, we can press the play button here to play back. And you'll see it's a 3-second animation, and if I scrub back through the timeline here, or with the playhead, you can see that we've got this animated texture, sort of turning the screen on, and then we've got this squiggly line moving from left to right. And this is pretty easy to do, so I'm going to go ahead and show how we can create something like this in After Effects and then import that as an image sequence in Blender, and then render it out as an image sequence from Blender, bring it back into After Effects to create some post-production effects, and then create a streaming video that we can put online somewhere like YouTube or Vimeo. Okay, so let's jump in. This is a reference image that I found to help guide some of the features of my TV. So you can see here I've actually created a piece of furniture rather than put these legs directly on the TV, and I have sort of a rectangular feature on mine as well with kind of a knob. I didn't spend too much time modeling this, but I did try to capture some of the features of this. For instance, the aspect ratio of the screen, mine's not quite as exaggerated here, but it will be pretty easy to reproduce this object in Blender. So let's get started. Okay, here we are in Blender, and we have our trusty default cube to start with. So let's press tab to jump into edit mode here. And if we look at our reference image, we know that we don't want a perfect square here for our screen, so we're going to have to adjust that. The first thing I'm going to do is go to face mode, and we're going to extrude that, and then while we're extruding, press S to scale, and then we can actually scale that in. You could also use this insert faces tool as well. So for instance, if we click that, you'll see that it does essentially the same thing as extrude. And then we can go ahead and push that back to create that sloped bezel. The other thing we need to do is create some space to the right and maybe change the aspect ratio here to be square, or to go from square to something else. So let's actually jump to front view, turn on our X-ray mode. Let's grab everything, and actually let's grab the top. Yeah, that should be everything. We're going to scale vertically, and so that's looking a little bit closer. If we pull up our reference, that's fine. Okay, another thing we can do is either extrude from or just grab these faces, these vertices rather, and pull these out. Okay, and that gives us an area here to sort of stick more geometry on. So let's maybe change the shape of this as well. So I'm going to add an edge loop here. And maybe scale this in. So we're going to scale this on the X. And that should kind of approach the look we're going for. I think one of the things that we can do is maybe bring this in a bit more. So let's go to face mode, grab these, and kind of exaggerate that. Okay, that looks a little bit better. It's kind of up to you how close you want to stick to the reference. You can do any kind of model that you want. This is kind of the first thing that came to mind when I started modeling. So if you want to find something more interesting, feel free to do that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick some geometry here and maybe create a knob. So I'm going to add another cube. Instead of trying to model everything as the same object, I'm going to just create some more geometry here and just kind of stick it in place. So move that down here, and let's scale that to be something like that. There we go. Just have it coming out slightly, and that should work for us. And then maybe I'm going to add a knob here. So let's create a cylinder, rotate that 90 degrees on the x-axis, scale that down, and I'm just going to go to the side view to place that. Yeah, that should work. And it's in the wrong spot here, so okay, so I kind of made a mistake here. I was in edit mode when I added these other pieces of geometry. So what we can do is press A, and then I can right click and separate by loose parts. And now we've got 3 pieces of separate geometry. If you make that mistake like I just did, it's very easy to correct it, so don't worry about that. All right, and let's move this over and move that down. I'm just gonna go ahead and move that origin to the middle. Not that it matters. I just want to be precise with that. So let's move the origin to that geometry. Okay, that should be fine. All right, so that's actually most of what I need. I'm gonna go back in, and we want to make the face a separate piece to make it easier to add a different material to it, as well as shape it. So there's no real reason why this would need to be a part of the rest of the geometry. If you build this as an object, they are 2 separate pieces. So we can actually press P on the keyboard, or you can right click and go down to separate, and then just do by selection. So instead of loose parts, whatever selected will now be separated out. So now we have that screen. We can actually press S to scale that up slightly, so we get some overlap here. And I do want to make it curved. So one of the ways I'm going to do that is by adding some resolution. So if I press tab to go into edit mode here, we need some subdivisions. So let's go and just add subdivision. I'm going to add 2 subdivisions, put it on simple so it doesn't curve the outside of the perimeter, and then just press tab to go to object mode, and now we can press apply. So if you weren't able to hit apply, it's because we were still in edit mode. Okay, so now that this has some subdivisions, we can take a look at that in the wireframe view. You can see our subdivisions. What we can do is press tab and choose the center vertice, and I'm going to turn on proportional edit here. So that way when I move it, you can see that sphere is dictating what gets proportionally moved. I'm actually going to press G and X, or excuse me, Y. And the reason for that is that I can now use my scroll wheel separately while I'm dragging this. So right now I'm not clicking on anything, and that makes it easier for me to use the scroll wheel when I'm trying to manipulate the curvature here. If I was to use this move tool here, I would have to hold it down and use the mouse wheel at the same time, which is difficult. So now I've got a slight curvature, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I just want to make sure that it intersects these, the bezel. So it does look like I'm totally covered here. And the last thing I'm going to do is go into the smooth shading mode with this object. So I'm going to right click, do smooth shade, and now it's going to get rid of an appearance of polygons. And I'm going to add some more bevels to this object. So if I was to edit and then maybe select, press 2 on the keyboard, select this edge loop, let's go ahead and add a bevel. So I'm going to make it maybe that big, but I'm going to open up our options before I confirm it. And we're going to increase the segments to 3. And then if I escape, you'll see that it gives it a slight curve. If I was to right click and do shade smooth, let's try that again. There we go. You see it's shading everything smooth. We don't want that. So we want to go down to our properties here. So this is object data properties, and then we're going to open up normals, click on auto smooth, and auto smooth will calculate smoothness based on the angle of difference. So it's not smoothing past 90 degrees or 30 degrees in this case. Okay, so we can go ahead and add, let's do option A to deselect. Try that again. Let's do option shift click to get that edge loop, and go ahead and add another bevel. And this is just to capture some highlights. I'm going to go into front view and just move that over so it matches the size of the other bevels. I had proportional edit turned on, so I'm going to disable that so I can move this. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And now I can just maybe create some furniture. So I'm going to add another cube. Make sure X-ray is turned on so I can select all my vertices. Okay. And I want to sit this right on top. Okay, and maybe I'll make this a bit narrower. And actually, maybe I'll scale that. Okay. I'm going to add some legs. So let's just add a cylinder. And I'm going to give this 16 vertices instead of 32. Let's tab in to edit that. Grab the bottom and scale that in. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and add a mirror modifier. And I'm actually going to mirror using this object here. And I think I'm going to shorten this table up so that it looks a bit better. Okay, and I want to put some bevels on this table to round off these corners. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with the bevel modifier. And I'm going to add 3 segments. And we're going to make this 0.0. So we're getting this large radius here because it's stretched. So if I do Control A, we're going to apply the scale, and you can see that it normalizes all of the edges. So we're maybe going to put that at 0.01 and turn on smooth shading, and so that gives us some nice highlights. And we can then add smooth shading here for these legs as well. Okay, so that should be good enough, and we'll add maybe a ground plane to capture shadows. So add a plane, let's scale that up and move it down. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of geometry, and that should be all we need here. So of course you can do any kind of model or scenario you want, but the main focus is to now get an image sequence onto this screen. So I will do that next.